Guys, we're going to talk about how do we understand the mid-range position. Mid-range is going to look like I'm basically playing butterfly guard. Butterfly guard is more of a sweeping style of guard. I want you to think about all the different directions we could take ourselves and our opponent based on our opponent's reactions and their posture, and how we can also force reactions in our opponent to lead us into the attacks we want. A lot of times when people are dealing with a strong defensive player from a seated position, when our opponent's on their knees, a lot of the times here guys are thinking everything's about pull. They're always trying to pull their opponent, and they find that the attacks they want out of those pulls, that might be elevations, just aren't there. Or our opponent might have a posture where his head's super low, he's super worried about you get into the legs, so he's got this defensive posture. And if we were to persist in that linear direction to attacking the legs, that opportunity might not come throughout the whole round, throughout the whole match. So our opponent's posture is going to dictate where we go next. And by attacking the opponent where they're vulnerable, will cause overreactions to lead us to the attacks we want. So you're really going to have to chain submission attacks and movements here to lead yourself to the attack you want. A good example would be if our opponent's posture is low, we can practice a hip heist snapping style of movement. Whereas just like in wrestling, you snap a guy enough times, they're going to want to raise their head. That'll lead to the shot. Whereas if we're playing in a seated position, we keep snapping our opponent's head, they're naturally going to start to lift their head. And when our opponent has a higher posture, what does that give us? It gives us the leg attacks and the leg entries and potentially the elevations we want from these positions. So broadly, I want to show you, if we are seated here and Nick's in front of me here, what do I mean by if my opponent's overly concerned about leg entries? That might mean his head is all the way down here. If I'm trying to get to the legs or any engagement from here, it would be quite silly to recklessly pursue that. If his posture's low, a great option is just to heist and snap him down. If he's worried about that and his posture's low, the second he feels my hand back here, he might start to raise his posture. And then from there, we can start thinking about taking our shots. If our opponents just put us into this position, and instead of heisting to front head, we're heisting to getting back up, now they might start thinking about trying to rush us to hold us down. And as they bring their weight towards us, that leads us to our sweeping game. And we can also combine all these together. If he's worried about me standing up here, and I start to come up and he starts to rush me, again, we're leading into our heisting game. We're using our heisting game to lead into our sweeping game. If Nick's in front of me here and his arms are outstretched and he's trying to push me here, we've got great opportunities for drags. If he's framing against me here, we've got great opportunities to secure the elbows and secure our weight underneath. So we've got to be able to attack our opponent with the posture they're giving us. If Nick's sitting on his knees in front of me here and his shoulders are far back, something as simple as pushing his shoulders over his hip line, we can sometimes secure sweeps. But if we are pushing him here and Nick doesn't like that and he starts to come forward, we can go back into our sweeping game or our elevation game. So I want you to think of the position as a very dynamic position, almost wrestling from our butt rather than the traditional style guards where everything's pulling, everything's trying to get under our opponent. We can push him, we can snap him, we can sweep him, we can elevate him, and we can even shoot from that position. So just remember, it's a dynamic position, and don't focus solely on one attack. Use your opponent's posture to help you decide where we're going to go from there. And if our opponent strongly defensively reacts to everything, then things as simple as a head snap is going to raise their posture to lead you into other attacks. Should be submission chains from there. And again, if there's enough space, just stand up. And now, next time you find yourself in this position with the same opponent, they're going to be significantly closer to you, and we're going to be able to have greater submission options. All right, guys, we're starting with the most simple concept from the mid-range guard position, and that is Nick's shoulder line in relation to his hips. So this needs to be said. It's super, super simple. But again, if Nick has a defensive posture where his shoulders are back, and you'll see this is super common, where guys will be here, Nick will have his elbows tight, and whatever I'm trying to do is just pushing me away. Super frustrating, right? And this is the position where people get stuck because all they're focused on is pulling. Everything's like they want to grab and pull. They want to take a scoop. They want to pull them on top of them. But really, what we need to do is we need to build those attacks in such a way that we want Nick to push forward. So we're thinking, oh, we'll just pull him. But if I actually push Nick, Nick might push back, leading to other attacks. If he doesn't push back, this is what happens. I take a frame. We can do either shoulder, really, anything to send him back, because you can see his shoulders are very close to his hip line. If we have a line here, his shoulders are very close. So I can just frame and come up and just push Nick over. You're surprised how effective this is? For those older blue belts that don't know anything, that just don't want you to submit them this round, so they just basically have a defensive wrestling style posture from here. But again, if Nick's here and he's got his posture back, and everything I'm doing is just pushing me away, we're getting nothing going from here. Just push and come straight on top. And how you'll see this engage other attacks that we'll follow up later is if I push Nick, and what does he want to do? He wants to push back. What's that giving me? That's helping me snap him to the ground. So obviously get into snaps later from this position. It's super simple. You have to provide attacks in all directions. If we want to pull someone, we need to build it with pushes. Just pulling someone might work on lower belts, but yeah, we need to chain these movements together so that we can force our opponent to move in the direction we want to move them without having to pull them that way ourselves. All right, guys, so we have to cover the most simple option from here, which is going to be like a very simple hip heist up. But what's key about this is your opponent or your training partners have to understand that you can do this. And because they understand that you can do this, they have to expect it, and they have to change the way they approach your guard. If you were to train with someone and you knew that the second you gave them any space at all, they're just getting up, you have to change your range. You have to actively try to hold them down and pin them. So we need to practice this movement, even if you're shit at wrestling, because even if they take you down again, an opponent that's taken you down a few times would rather just take you down once, conserve energy, and play the game from there. So if we're playing in our mid-range here, and Nick's posture is back like this, he's making no attempt at all to get me down, we're going to take a cross post, a frame on the shoulder. We got our opposite hand framing on the ground. I'm lifting my hips off the ground, and I'm just getting back to my feet here. Why this is so simple is obviously because of the frame here. If I hip heist up and I lose the frame, Nick's just gonna circle, take you down, take my back, numerous attacks. So we need to keep this distance management here. So again, if this didn't exist and I'm just trying to get up, look at the vulnerability of whatever Nick could do. If we have a frame here, it's keeping Nick away from me, and in fact, him pushing into me helps push me up. So again, super simple, but you have to throw that into your game. The only way this movement is going to successfully lead to opportunities that wouldn't have existed previously is if your opponents know you're going to do it, your training partners know you're going to do it. Throw it into the mix from the mid-range as well, and you're going to find your opponent in his attempt to hold you down is going to try to close distance, potentially in a reckless way that's going to lead to other attacks and submission opportunities. All right, guys, so we've covered our basic, classic heist back to the feet, but we don't necessarily have to go back to the feet and separate. We can look for a height advantage, which is, again, one of those concepts I said at the beginning that would be pervasive throughout this series, and that is constantly looking for head and hip height. So we can use a heist to basically stay in kind of the danger zone here to start setting up attacking options. What do I mean by that? I mean that if we're in this mid-range guard, I could heist up and get my legs out of the way, whether that be to the feet or I could even remain on my knees here, or I could heist from here, and instead of taking a cross post, we could have a post to the same side and I could pop up and I could stand to my legs here, or I could remain on a knee. Basically, we can follow the height of our opponent here. So if I come to a knee and Nick remains on his knees, we can use this to start setting up inversions of the legs. The way I'm going to do this, I'm going to place the back of my hand outside Nick's knee here. We do that because you can see there's no space between Nick's calf and his butt because his weight is on his butt. So I gently rest my hand here until it's go time. How do we get the weight off his butt if he's choosing to stay here? I'm going to use my secondary hand to grab the far lat, and I'm going to apply a pulling pressure to bring Nick's weight forward. And as you can see, now we've opened up some space. So my hand's basically monitoring here until we get that butt off the ground and we can take a scoop grip. You can see when I invert from here, I'm completely inverted. My head is below my hips. When my head's below my hips, if Nick tries to sprawl, it doesn't have the desired effect. If my hips are up center here and Nick sprawls, completely squashes me. So what's key about this, and what most people struggle with, is a lack of commitment. And that's a lack of commitment to getting completely upside down, which is interesting because the commitment keeps you safer than that sort of hesitation that leads you off center. So when I'm here with Nick, I'm hip hoisting up and I'm trying to get in line with Nick's knees here, as close as I can to this angle. Why do I have to create that angle? So I'm closer to this leg. If I'm out here, Nick's leg's completely out of range. Not to say we don't have other attacks here. But when I heist up, I want to create as close an angle to the leg we want to attack as possible. Resting the back of our hand on the outside of Nick's knee, grabbing that far lat grip, and I'm pulling my head underneath, and when space opens up, we take a scoop grip. I pull my head completely under my hips here, and I start to pendulum Nick to bring his weight forward. So my leg that's not hooking anything initiates the movement, and I use my inside leg to lift Nick's hips above his shoulders here. That's how we create a forward row. So we use momentum, bring him forward into a leg attack. If we come back, if Nick's just too powerful here and I can't get him to move forward, I let go of his shoulder, his armpit here. I control two legs. Instead of coming forward, I'm going to pendulum forward and swing around towards his legs as I bring both his knees together. If I have control over both Nick's knees here and he's trying to sprawl, it's going to be very, very tough. So when we're upside down here and we're not getting that forward momentum here, Nick's just too powerful, I let go of the shoulder and grab the legs. We can grab two knees, or if your arms are long enough, you can connect your hands here. So now we've got just a bit better of a grip and control over his legs. I can't bring him forward, so I pendulum around and I bring his knees together here. If Nick's knees are together, he won't be able to squash me. Nick's trying to squash me here. It's very difficult. What I do is I walk my secondary leg underneath Nick. And that's how we create the angle to get on top, and ultimately we've ended with double leg control. So we've got our hip heist here. Instead of hip heisting away with a cross grip, I'm taking the same side grip, popping my hips up. Even if his weight's on me a little bit here, I bump and dive that knee to the side. I secure the far lat, back of the hand. I pull Nick forward, take a scoop grip. We either take him over with a pendulum, or if he's too strong here, grab both legs and we pendulum back into those legs. Nick's weight is on me here. I don't just flare my inside knee, my right knee, which might damage my knee. I walk my weight underneath Nick. Now when I'm underneath Nick, very easy to come on top. Another option here, basically same technique, is that when I heist, if Nick understands the battle for head height, he will try to maintain head height. So when we heist up from here, if I come to a knee and Nick, recognizing that he's losing the head height battle, starts to stand, I stand as well. And what I want to do is, if you can see how far back Nick's leg is, I don't just overreach, I step my leg back as well. Now my leg's closer to his. We have a few options from here. I could completely abandon the grip on the far armpit and reach for both legs. If we have both legs, very easy for me to roll through. All I do is a forward roll and I use my inside leg to bump his weight forward, and we land in our leg attacks here. Or a more conservative option, again, we have this height battle. I get here, Nick gets up too. I can secure a whizzer, still step back, and what we can do is I can again reach the back of my hand through and start to roll Nick over. So we've got two options with the same leg attacks. But again, it's built upon the concept of head height. We're both seeking head height in these positions, and I have to try to maintain that advantage. Nick is, although on top playing catch up, he's here, he's got the head height. I come up to here, I'm winning. Nick stands up, he's winning. I stand up again, now we're back in the fight. And again, based on the positioning here, I'm stepping towards the leg I want to attack. We can go and grab two legs, do a forward roll and kick, or I can switch off to a whizzer and reach the back of the leg and do a shoulder roll. As I shoulder roll, we put him over with the whizzer. And again, we don't just have to go to leg attacks here. We can come on top and turn it into a sweeping position. So two options out of a hip heist and options to attack the legs, build upon the concept of both of us seeking head height. And you can see how me not accepting bottom position, me trying to get back up, has led to submission opportunities that wouldn't have presented themselves unless I was trying to seek head height. So we've covered heisting back to the feet. We've covered heisting to the legs, and that is to the legs on the kneeling and standing opponent. Again, covering the concept of constantly seeking head height and using that concept leading to submission opportunities. Now we're going to talk about heisting, but using it in the context of securing the front headlock position. So something I've only recently seen become a sort of a pervasive theme in the jiu-jitsu scene is going from a seated position against the kneeling opponent to securing the front head. And why I believe this has only become something common in the last few years is because of leg attacks, people's natural posture on their knees is lowering. They're trying to get their head in the way. The lower they are to the ground, the harder it is to get underneath them. And because of that, a lot of grapplers have a one-dimensional game where they're still trying to get underneath or pull their opponent, but the posture isn't allowing them to really be effective in that game. So rather than forcing something that isn't there, we need to take advantage of the posture our training partner or opponent has given us. And that is, the lower their head goes to the ground, the more we're going to snap it to the ground. Just like in wrestling, right? If Nick's posture is high, it'd be crazy for me to be trying to force this. I might be a great front headlock guy, but if Nick's posture's up here and I'm trying to pull it down, it's silly. What we need to do, and we can do it just in wrestling, is if I'm here and Nick's posture's high, I could just straight shoot on him here. Say I hit that on Nick a couple times, next time he's in this position, his head's lower. Or if Nick's posture's high, and what I want to do is attack the legs, he's vulnerable here because we can see open space. If Nick knows I'm a leg locker, which is a constant theme, is their head lowers. Now when I'm going to attack the legs, it's actually going to be quite difficult for me to get to those legs. And if I were to force it, it would be kind of silly here. I'm forcing something that isn't there when my opponent's presenting something that really is there. So when Nick has a posture like this, I want you to take advantage of it by taking a collar tie, lifting your hips off the ground with your alternate hands. And what I'm going to do is I'm not using muscular strength to pull Nick to the ground. I'm using the fact that now my weight's in floating space. I'm going to slide both knees back and we're going to snap him to the ground. From here we have two options in terms of how we can secure the front head. The strongest, because I never take space off of his head, is to keep this hand here while the posting hand turns into the chin strap and our secondary hand can secure the elbow, or the more dangerous option, but again, this option can work if your timing's good, is the hand that's on the back of the head becomes the chin strap hand. Obviously, you can see why this option is less preferred, is because I momentarily take weight off Nick's head, and when we take weight off Nick's head, he might posture again and get out of there. Whereas if my hand's on his head and he's trying to posture, and I switch, now we've never taken weight off the back of his head. Let's look at it from this side as well. I'm playing my mid-range guard. Nick's in front of me here. If I was one track minded on attacking underneath or trying to shoot from here, his head, everything's in the way. But what's not in the way is an opportunity to enter the front head. So again, collar tie and post, we lift our hips. I slide my hips away as my right hand slams him into the ground. Two options, we switch, take a front head on the other side, which is going to be our strongest option because we're not letting go of the head. There's never a lack of contact. My hands keeping pressure in the back of his head, it stays there until my shoulder. Or say for example, when I take a riskier approach, but sometimes can work if your speed's good, is the hand that's at the back of the head becomes the chin strap and the shoulder pressure. Quite often, a lot of people, the same side they snap is the same side they want the chin strap because it's their dominant hand. So say for example, my stronger pulling hand is going to be my right hand. And that also means my chin strap hand is going to be my right hand. So quite often I'll do what's probably a less preferred approach because my left hand chin strap and front head attacks significantly weaker than the right. And also because this is my weaker side, my snap's not as good. So me personally, I do quite often use the same side snapping hand as the same side chin strapping hand. But I just have to make sure the time at which this hand switched to the chin strap is incredibly quick. That's how quick we have to be. If I leave any time here, Nick just postures up. I miss it, I might end up in a front head. So this is basically how we're using Nick's posture to determine our next attack. Is although I might be a leg locker, I might want to shoot from the butt. If his posture is low, we have to attack that posture. I'm going to summarize some options we can do from the front head in sort of a submission only context, but this isn't a product about front head attacks. I'll shamelessly plug another one where I cover front head attacks in that. So if you want to learn the all-encompassing game of the front headlock, check out my anti-wrestling instructional. We build into front head attacks out of obviously sprawls, snap downs, many options against offensive wrestlers. But to summarize my game from the front head, when we secure Nick in the front head, I make a distinction between where his hands are. If his hands are on the ground, that means he's seeking height, but it also means he's vulnerable to front head submissions. I can easily start attacking high wrists, start attacking submissions from here. If Nick was on his elbows and I'm attacking submissions, he can hand fight here. But if he's on his elbows, go behinds are very easy for me to keep weight on him and circle to the back. If Nick's on his hands here and I go for a go behind, it's going to be much more difficult for me. He's going to be much lighter on his hands as I'm chasing. He might get up, right? So basically, my game is if they're on their hands, we threaten to strangle. If they drop to their elbows to fight the hands, we hit a go behind. You never see wrestlers hang out here. This is where you see jiu-jitsu guys hang out to hand fight. Wrestlers will be here, but this also does lead to vulnerabilities because now their hands are supporting their weight and they're vulnerable to high risk attacks. We can use the dilemma between those two movements to dictate where we go next. For guys on his elbows, we don't just want to attack front head submissions. All right, guys, so when we play that hip heisting game, the threat of attaining head height, what our training partners generally do is they want to keep us down. They want to hold us down. It's a natural instinct. If you've got to a good position, a dominant position on someone, and they're trying to maintain that position, it's inbuilt in them that if you put someone down, they try to get up, you want to hold them down. So if we've added in the heisting dynamic, especially the heisting dynamic to submissions, such as the legs or such as front head attacks, what can happen is they rush us to try to keep us down. They're like, shit, I've taken them down, I got them to a good position, they're trying to get up. They come forward, and that can lead to sort of sweeping pressure from there. It can lead to offensive cycles that lead into butterfly sweeps. So I'll show you what I mean by that, right? The best time to hit a butterfly sweep is not when Nick is stationary here. It's when Nick is coming into me. And how do we encourage movement where they come forward? That is by threatening height. If Nick senses me coming up, what does he want to do? He wants to keep me down. He wants to get me back down. He wants to maintain his dominant position of being above me here. So just by the mere fact that previously we've started working on heisting moves, you've thrown them into your game, or you've demonstrated them in high-level competition, guys are going to know that you don't play a regular game from here. There's a head height dynamic. So to avoid them losing what they've just gotten, especially in the context of ADCC scoring, they're going to want to hold you down. And the best sweep to take advantage of this new dynamic to your game is a very basic butterfly sweep. And what we're going to be looking for here is a collar tie and an inside elbow tie. So we're trying to get the inside position here. And as our opponent comes forward, we're clubbing these two together. If I can pass Nick's elbow past his center line and I can touch his forehead to the floor, we're going to send him flying. So our upper body sequence here is as Nick comes forward, we're looking to do this. We're trying to touch his forehead to the floor, get his elbow past the center line. What we want to do with our legs here is, the most common mistake people make is they leave their non-butterfly hooking leg, they leave that knee outside their opponent's legs. But here's the problem, I'm trying to put Nick's head where my knee is. And if Nick's head is trying to hit here and my knee's in the way, we're not going to generate the same sweeping pressure. So we have to place our knee inside of their knee. So I need to remove this out of the equation. We're making space for them to fall into. What we want to do with our second leg is we want to hook a butterfly hook, but I want to hook it as close to his knee as possible. The best way to understand this positioning here is by talking about basically an uchimata. So if me and Nick were standing up, if I were to try to throw Nick with an inside hook and I was close to his groin here, he hops with me. His hips stay the same height. Because I'm attacking the center of his hips, both hips move together. For me to take Nick over, I need this hip to elevate over his other hip. And the way to do that is by kicking close to the knee here. Now when I hop, you can see his hips coming over the other hip. It's rotating and he loses the ability to stay up. The same from a butterfly sweep. If my hook's too close to the groin, as I sweep Nick, his hips stay square. There's no turn in the hips. So as we sweep him, we want to be as close to the knee as possible so that when we start to gain momentum, his hip turns over the other hip and he loses the ability to keep his balance. So if we combine all these things, head to the floor, elbow center line, secondary knee inside their knees, butterfly sweeping foot close to the knee, we're going to have the perfect butterfly sweep here. Combining that with the fact that Nick's trying to rush me here, we're going to create powerful, powerful sweeps here. We send them flying. That's the key to getting those movement arcs where the guy goes flying over the top of you. So again, Nick's worried about me standing, so he's trying to keep me down. That means he's bringing forward pressure in. Everything happens at the same time. Club and elbow, knee inside, head to the floor, and we can use that to come on top. So that's our basic butterfly sweep from here. Collar tie, inside elbow tie, knee inside, hooking as close to the knee as possible. The only problem with this sweep is that a standard butterfly sweep, when I have an underhook, means that as I sweep Nick, if he tries to get back up, because of the nature of this underhook, he's pinned. I want you to think about it. If we sweep with a collar tie, if you were to try to hold someone down here, they're going to shoot straight up at you and start coming up. So we need to anticipate, based on who our opponent is, what their likely reaction, based on the rule set, based on who's up by which amount of points, based on is there points, we can sort of anticipate their reaction. we need to anticipate that if we sweep them, they're not going to want to stay down. So what we can actually do is a sort of a circular exercise where a hip heist, the thread of a hip heist, leads to a sweep, and Nick coming up from that sweep leads me back to the front head. So basically, the thread of the first attack, the destination would have been the front head. We've gone a roundabout's way, knowing his reactions, to lead us back to where we wanted to end up from the first attack. So the way we're going to take advantage of that is we hit our sweep, we hit it perfect, Nick starts to come up, I get my legs out of the way, and I stuff his head to the ground. We can hit whichever version of the front headlock we want. So we know we're going to send him flying, but we don't have the grips to pin. So because we don't have the grips to pin, we anticipate a strong defensive reaction and use that to take advantage and secure another dominant position. So one more time, we're here, we were threatening a heist, and Nick's like, no, I don't want that to happen. So we sweep him, we're trying to pin him, but he starts coming up, keep control over the head, and stuff it into the ground. So what we've been able to achieve is a strong butterfly sweeping game through, because of the threat of hip heisting and head height, circling back to a defensive reaction to the sweep, leading us to the front headlock. All right, we need to cover basic arm drags from here. An arm drag posture can lead you to basically two options. When someone's arms are extended, it's sort of like a fear response or a pushing response. That can lead us to arm drags, can also lead us to elevations. But throughout this whole section of the mid-range guards, I want you to know how we're throwing combinations. These are like punches. One movement leads to another, and we're chaining attacks until one of them works. If we keep forcing strong reactions in our opponent, forced areas, we're going to find our attack. And typically speaking, the better an opponent or training partner is, the longer the submission chain will be. Just like if you see high-level wrestlers, one movement doesn't put a guy down. It ends up being a scramble of 3, 4, 5, 6, and you can usually measure how good someone's defensive movements are based on how many attacks we need to chain together to get the attack we want. And what's funny is sometimes the first threat circles all the way back to a long scramble, and we end up getting the first movement we try. We end up back to where we started. So let's look at Nick's posture here, what would lead to arm drags and elevations. We'll just talk about arm drags here. And that is if Nick's arms are out, extended here. If he's like framing to keep us away, what we can do here is an arm drag. It's basically like kind of like a karate chop. So I'm going to take an outside arm and I'm going to hit his wrist aggressively here. And that strike's going to lead into a grip. What we're going to do with our other arm is basically very similar to what we did when we chased them up. But it's like a bit of a karate chop, maybe a Mexican karate chop here. And we're taking a underhook at the same time. We're pulling that through, right? So Nick's extended here. I'm trying to get an attack, but these arms are causing me issues. So we're hitting that Mexican karate chop and we're securing that far hip. And when I secure this arm drag, I don't want Nick to be able to post close. I want this arm drag to almost slide down the elbow, and I want to pull him far. The further he has to post this arm, the more likely I am to secure a dominant position here. And we can actually combine these movements with a kick. And actually we can kick either leg here. A lot of people focus on whichever leg we kick, but they focus on singular. We have to kick this leg, we have to kick this. Any of these legs that go back is going to force a stronger distant post. So Nick's framing against me here. We can combine a kick of the legs. You can see now I've really ended up behind Nick. Very easy for me to start circling. As long as we keep a strong grip on the armpit, we grab a shallow grip on the hook, and I pull everything tight. Now if Nick's trying to circle out here, I'm glued to him to secure a rear body lock. We'll try a different angle here. So when I'm playing here, so again, either one, we can kick the far leg or we can kick the near leg. Whichever your leg's closest to, more comfortable to. Nick's framing here, I'm not getting any attacks. And we secure that far here. Nick's trying to circle out here. And we're able to secure our rear body lock. So again, super basic arm drag, super strong threat. But I want you to remember is these all chain together. So just to give you a quick idea of what we can do off of an arm drag is, if I hit a drag on Nick and he starts pulling his elbow back, what happens is he leaves space. No one pulls their elbows back in such a disciplined manner. Usually they're pulling back and their elbows come wide. So when we hit a drag and his elbows come back, it's easy for me to secure an underhook. So I quite often will plan even two legs inside here. I start hitting drags as he pulls back. I sit up to secure underhooks. And that's how these positions can circle and chain together. If I want an underhook here and Nick's not giving it to me, there's no space, we can start thinking about hitting drags. As he pulls back, we follow him up, secure underhooks here. And that's when we can start thinking about setting up sweeps off of those underhooks. So we use the threat of arm drags or the defensive reaction of arm drags to lead to underhooks, or we can use an effective arm drag to secure the back from a mid-range seated versus kneeling opponent. All right, so another attack we can use from a defensive posture where our opponent's arms are extended. I always call this sort of a classic sort of fear response, like we're coming at someone and they're like, get away from me. So you'll see this come up, especially in a lot of lower belts, but obviously depending on the opponent, you'll see higher level guys have that same classic fear response. So if we're playing guard here and I'm trying to get off attacks and Nick just keeps his arms extended, pushing against me here, I can create an elevation from here, but I need to get a grip on Nick's elbows here. I need to get some form of control. So I want to grab the elbows and I want to roll my elbows inside here. And that's actually going to weaken Nick's thumb post here. If Nick has a grip on my shoulder here and his thumb's inside, I can bring my elbow in and clear that grip. And now we've got a more meaningful grip on this elbow. So if his arms are extended, we're trying to turn his elbows down. We're trying to strip those thumbs as best we can. And now there's really nothing stopping me from getting underneath Nick. So I'm gonna place both my feet inside, slide under Nick. And the trick here, and the common mistake people make, is they think, I wanna elevate someone, I lift my feet. Even though Nick's significantly smaller than me, if I try to lift my legs, he's heavy. What the key is I bring my knees to my chest. And that's how we create this elevation, where we've obviously got opportunities to attack the legs here. So again, if Nick's got frames extended on me here, and he's got those thumb posts, if the thumb posts are in, it's actually quite hard because he still has active frames. So to clear these frames, we want to rotate the elbows in and strip those thumbs. So I'm rotating his elbows with my wrist and stripping the thumb grips. I slide in, and again, the key is knees to chest. That's what creates the elevation. It creates a weightless neck. So obviously from here, we got the classic extend one leg, bring one knee to your chest. That means Nick's leg's gonna fall into a single leg X or an archie. Or if we created an elevation here and Nick's crossing his feet, makes it hard for me to extend one leg. But what we can do is we can take a side frame, grab the leg, and I can pummel one foot to the far hip. And we look down the hip line. We look down the hip line, so when we extend one leg, the rear leg, we can secure across archie, and Nick can't sprawl on me here. If I extend both legs, he squashes me. Or if, when he's elevated, if I elevate Nick, I pummel my feet, but I don't create an angle down the hip line, he squashes me every time. And that's how we can risk hurting our knee here. A lot of guys, their foot gets internally rotated, they tear their LCL. So if we've elevated them here and they cross their feet, cross frame, grab the leg, foot to the far hip, look down the hip line, elevate and extend one leg. And now we've created a perfect angle. So if Nick's trying to sprawl on me, we've got his knees together, we can knock him back. But again, we've covered extensively in other products the leg game. I just want to show you how you can build a well-rounded game to lead to these attacks, and how this mid-range seated versus kneeling position is super dynamic. We can get up, we can heist, we can get at the front head, we can shoot, we can drag, we can elevate, we can sweep, tons and tons of options. and it'll be very hard to have a predictable game from there if you encompass all these areas. All right, so the final attack of this section is we can shoot double legs from our knees, which again, another unorthodox strategy that our opponents and training partners won't expect. And if they get hit with it, they'll have to change the way they play from this position. So again, being unorthodox from here is a great strength, because being unpredictable, they're not going to know what you're going to attack next. So for me, the best time to shoot from this position, we could even do it if Nick's postured up, right? As long as these arms aren't already ready to down block. So depending on what sort of reactions we get from here, if I'm pushing on Nick and he goes to push back, we can hit drags and he pulls his arm back. I can just shoot him back straight over his knees. So any sort of reaction of the wrist that's going to get these arms back. If I'm pulling here, Nick has a strong reaction, I can take a post, throw our legs to the side, and shoot straight over his knees there. If Nick extends with one arm, say he's taking a frame on me here, I can post, slip my head out of the way, and I'm holding it down, basically a block here, so we have space to shoot through the middle here. And the way I do is I throw my legs out of the way and take him down. So look at that one from a different angle. He's taking a single frame on me here. If I can push, potentially get it straight out of the way, or if it's a bit higher up, I can pummel my neck out of the way and clear it. Now you can see there's no ability for him to down block or throw in an underhook. Taking a cross post, we throw our legs out of the way, shoot quick, ultimately trying to end up with my legs the opposite side of his body to my head to avoid any guillotine threats. So when he's taking a single post from here, we can clear our neck out of the way. I'm using my hand on the ground and both legs in the opposite direction to get to my knees or to one foot, and I shoot straight through the middle here. Very effective, especially when the training partner of your opponent doesn't expect it, especially when they're sloppy from that position. They're not expecting any attacks that involve forward pressure. They think everything's going to be a pulling attack or us trying to slide into a guard.